put his head down and he was crying. And he was crying for like a few minutes. Then he lifts his head up and he says, I can't save those Jews. And he looks at everyone in the crowd and he says, but what are you going to do for the Jewish people? So I figured, what does Am Yisrael need specifically here in Eretz Yisrael? Like, you have to think like an entrepreneur. And that's when Semichas Chaver was born. And thank God we're in over 300 locations now in 5 different languages. Our goal isn't just to teach Allah. Our goal is to create people who are on fire with Torah. We moved in September, and then a month later was October 7th. There was a guy who was like, like these like runners that are like obsessive runners. Like they wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they're like running like 10Ks and then 20Ks and 30Ks. And I always make fun of it. I was like, where are you running to? Who are you running from? And then the war breaks out. And he's like on the front lines. He's like in an elite unit going in and out and back and forth. And it hit me. He's not running for himself. And when he wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning, every step he's taking is for Am Yisrael. I saw an interview, someone sent me a clip of, I think his name is Michael Eisenberg, some like news agency, like asked him, don't you want to live in Chutzars? Like, isn't it like so much easier? And one of his, like the core of his answer that spoke to me is like, I'm not looking for a comfortable life. I'm looking for a meaningful life. Would you trade places with Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett is worth, I don't know, 100 and something billion dollars. Would you trade places with him? And I was like, yeah, of course. Oh, by the way, he's like 95 years old. Would you still trade places with him? After the Shiur, a woman comes up to me and she's like, I would trade places with Warren Buffett. I was like, you missed the point of the Shiur. She's like, and I'll tell you why.
I'm joined right now by a very special person in front of me. For those I can see on this camera right here, it's Rav Elyada Goldwicht. I've been looking forward to this interview for a while, and I just want to start off by saying thank you. And for those I can't tell the time of day because we're in the studio right now, it's well late into the night, and Baruch Hashem, you have a lot of things going on. You came to the Beit Shemesh community to give a shiur, and you're very gracious to give a little bit of your time so we could sit down together. So just want to start off by saying thank you for joining me.
Simcha Rabba, with great love and respect for you as well. And I'm very happy that you messed up my name, by the way, because growing up, like my whole life, that was like, no one got my name right.
Elyada.
Hashem knows. Elyada, or Hashem knew. It's one of the names of David HaMelech's children. For those who know Tanakh, that's what it was. But imagine like growing up in America with the name Elyada. And no one called me Eli. But yeah, it was fun. Especially at the DMV. Elyada. It's like
well, it's a very unique name, obviously, and I think you're probably the only person I know in the Jewish world that has that name. And as you're saying, growing up in your childhood with that name kind of brings me into the beginning of this conversation, if we can jump obviously right into that. Your childhood, growing up in America, and your family. For those that don't necessarily know the background that you come from, let's jump right into that. So take me through your earlier years, growing up in your family in America. What was that like? And then we'll go from there.
So first of all, Rav Nevinsal from the Old City, he has a son named Elyada. I think that's where my mother got the inspiration from. Not sure, but my mom chose all the names, which I guess is where it all begins, right? I have the most amazing parents, Baruch Hashem. My father's Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshiva University. My great uncle started Karen B'Yavneh, which was the first Hesder Yeshiva here in Israel. My father got an opportunity to go to America for 1 year as the visiting Rosh Yeshiva. And when I was younger, I was 2, 3 at the time, and he went. And he took a 1 year, quote unquote, sabbatical or trial period to the United States, and that year became a year, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and he's been there for a while. But to his claim, he is still referred to as the visiting Rosh Yeshiva whenever he gets introduced at a dinner or whatever. And they told him, like, listen, you're here for so long, like, do you want to change the title to like just the Rosh Yeshiva? He's like, no, in America, we're only visiting. And Israel is where we're supposed to be. So growing up, we were brought up in America, but we were visiting in America, right? So we felt that very much every day of our life growing up, and it was an exciting house. Meaning, like we were living on campus, which is in Yeshiva University, which in the early '90s was like Harlem was a step up. It was like the Washington Heights was crazy. There were like murders there. And I remember like there was the Jewish side on YU, and then there's the other Jewish side on Breuer's, which is the other side, like the other tip of the island. And when you would walk from one side to the next, every second or third week, you would see like new murals of like someone who just got killed and flowers laying down. And then Giuliani came and he cleaned it all up. But there weren't any Jewish families living in Washington Heights at the time, besides for like Rav Schachter and on the YU side, besides for like a few Rabbanim, Rabbi Reichman, Rav Cohn. But besides for that, it was just us. So like we grew up in the ghetto, like NYU, but there were always students in the house. So there was always action, always people coming in, funny stories, different situations. And then as I got older, more and more people started moving into Washington Heights, and it was an amazing place to grow up, and it was fascinating.
No, I can attest, by the way, to what you said about your dad being referred to as a visiting Rosh Yeshiva. I had the pleasure of living in Washington Heights for 6 months, and I used to daven Basikin with the sunrise every day, and your dad was there. And at the end, they would say, "Okay, do you want to give a little Dvar Torah?" And the one thing about him that was obviously very unique is he always gave it in Hebrew. And for me, I always felt, that was like the 6 months I happened to be in America, and I was like, wow, like I felt connected to back here. And I think obviously for your father, that's something that, in my opinion, he kept with him in America when he gives his shiur. Obviously, some are in English, some are not. But no wonder how he gets that title. I'm curious as you said before, your dad's original plan was to go to America for a year, and then you come back to Israel. And then you get, I'm going to use the word stuck. Some people like to use that word, some don't. But what was that like for you as a kid? You obviously were very young when you got there, and then you slowly start growing up, and then eventually you get back to Israel. So take me through that process of all you knew was America. You didn't necessarily know when you were going back to Israel, but then you eventually get back to Israel. How'd that happen?
So I was very young. I was 2, 3 when we came to America, and my upbringing was in America. Like I just knew every Shabbos meal and every event was always talking about Eretz Yisrael and the milas of Eretz Yisrael. And like when we would get a bottle of wine and it would be from Israel, I'd be like, oh, we have wine from Eretz Yisrael now. It's not Kedem. It's like we got a bottle from Eretz. So it was always that passion. And we also had discussed to go back usually once a year. Sometimes it wasn't that common. Sometimes it was once every 2 years or whatever, but more or less once a year we were able to come back. And when we would come back, it was like the anticipation of like we're going to Eretz Yisrael. Like we have that, and it was very exciting. And that's where I went through, elementary school and high school, and then yeshiva. I was in YU. I learned in Eretz Yisrael for a little bit. I learned in the Mir here in Israel as well. And when it was time to get married, so I kind of knew I wanted to live in Israel, but I really wasn't sure if I really wanted to live in Israel, because by then I was already, if I'm being honest, I was like Americanized. Like I was very comfortable with like the life there, and it's nice. It's a nice, comfortable, amazing life. And but I knew for sure I wanted to come for a year or two. So when I was dating my amazing wife, so I actually told her, I was like, we had a discussion, like, where do you want to live? So Israel wasn't even on the radar. Like it wasn't like if she knew I wanted to live in Israel, she would not have gone out with me. So I told her, I was like, listen, would you go to Israel for like a year or two? Or like, she's like, yeah, maybe for like a year, maybe 2. But then like we would come back to America. I was like, I think that's good enough for me, right? And I think also when people date, sometimes they get stuck on like, we have to be living here. We have to. In my eyes, I was like, if it works, you'll figure out where to live. And you'll see, I'm fast forwarding, but the reason why we stayed in Israel is really because of her. So she, who didn't want to come to Israel, was actually like the impetus to really stay. But that's how I ended up. So when I got married, so we came for a year, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and we're still here, thank God.
So that's actually where I want to touch on, and you perfectly led me into the next thing, which is you didn't necessarily have that plan to be here long term. Baruch Hashem, we're here 15 years later, something like that. 15 years later. And you said, obviously, your wife, who originally was a person that didn't want to stay here, is now the reason why you probably ended up being here. So take me through that. What happened, and how are you here now?
Right. So this is great. So we came for a year, and for you to understand, like my wife is a 4th generation American. Okay, so she's like already been born into the system like a very long time. And when we came here, and thank God she was pregnant with our first child, so she didn't even want to give birth in Israel. She was like, I'm going back to America to give birth. And as we did, we came in Elul, I think, and then we went back in June, and my daughter was born in August. So we had like 4 months in America, just because she didn't want to, because that's how Americanized she was. And I totally get it. Now, if I would have been like, oh, well, we have to stay in Israel, like it wouldn't have worked. So I went with the flow, and my daughter was born there, and we stayed there for a while. And then only after, I think, like Rosh Hashanah time, around that area, that's when we came back. And then also we stayed for a year till the summer, and then the next summer we came back for like 3 months. And in those 2 years, I was learning in the Mir, and then I knew that I wanted to learn halacha well also, because I felt like that was lacking. That I learned well, and I have smicha, but it wasn't like I didn't feel like I had like a full like a chiza on halacha. And I knew that the rabbinate smicha is like a very high level smicha, and I wanted to do it well. So I started a kollel started learning in a kollel that just opened up. It's called the Emek Learning Center. It's still around, an amazing place. And then I learned halacha there, and I started taking the bechinas. So I ended up those 2 years that was just the trial. So we say, no, let's do one more. We did one more, and then another one, and then in the meantime, my wife, like every Jew, falls in love with Eretz Yisrael because you're pulled here. There's like, this is where a Yid is supposed to be. Like you get pulled into Eretz Yisrael, and the more time you spend here, it's like you learn to love and appreciate. Like you're standing where Avram stood, and Yitzchak and Yaakov, and like the Tanakh is alive, and the Gemara is alive. The Yerushalmi at least, it's an amazing experience living in Eretz Yisrael. And I don't need I'm preaching to the choir. But this is where a Yid is supposed to be. So slowly but surely, she liked it to the point that I finished my smicha in like the rabbinut smicha, and then okay, so now I'm done. So now what do you do? So in Chutz La'aretz, when you're in the rabbinate, so there's like a career path trajectory, right? Like you go to shul, you become an assistant rabbi, and then an associate rabbi, and then maybe the rabbi of a shul, and maybe do programming. There's like a clearer career path, quote unquote. In Eretz Yisrael, there's no real like career path. So naturally, I was like, let's look for places where there's a career path. So I started sending out feelers in like different shuls and applying in Chutz La'aretz. And I got a few offers in a few different locations. And one of them was like super attractive. It was like literally what I wanted to do. I didn't really want to be a shul rabbi because I didn't think I would be a shul rabbi. I still don't think I would be a good shul rabbi because I wanted to teach Torah more than, shul rabbi is such an important job because you need to be in tune to people and to their needs and to what they're going through. And it's important. I just felt like I wouldn't do, like my talents are more in like giving over the geschmack of Torah and Yiddishkeit. And that's what I wanted to. So I actually got offered to start like a base medrash program in a very large shul in the tri-state area. And it was amazing. And they're like, yeah, come for a year. We'll get you a house next to the shul. It was amazing. And I speak to my, I was like, listen, like, let's go for a year. Like, what's the big deal? Like, we'll check it out. She's like, listen, I came here. I didn't even want to come here, right? But now I'm here. And I know you want to be here, right? So if you're going to America for 1 year and you're telling yourself it's 1 year, you're lying to yourself, right? You're not going to be there for 1 year. You're going to probably end up being there for much longer. And then she basically said in different type of versions, she's like, I made Aliyah once. It was hard enough, right? There's no way I'm doing it a second time. So if you're going to America, imagine that you're going forever. Right, for the rest of your life. Like maybe when we're 80, we'll retire in like some nursing home here. You can check in over there. So then I was like, okay, so we're in Eretz. So what do you do? So there's a book, Startup Nation, and we are a startup nation. Where else could that happen? So I figured, okay, let's try to figure out what does Am Yisrael need specifically here in Eretz Yisrael? What do maybe Olim need? Where's there a niche that hasn't been tapped into? Like you have to think like an entrepreneur. Okay, what service could I provide for Am Yisrael that'll be the best, that can really help them. So that's when I started thinking of, okay, I had this base medrash offer in Chutz La'aretz where I started thinking a little bit about like offering something. And I was like, let's try to apply it here and see if we can find a much better niche here. And that's when Semichas Chaver was born.
So I have to cut you off because I want to talk about Semichas Chaver, and we will. And hopefully a lot of people listening to this episode know exactly what that is. But I have to touch on what you said before, though, because it's a very important thing. Sometimes in life, or a common thing that we have to ask each other as Jews is, what is it that Hashem wants for us in this world, and how can we best fulfill our mission? And you and I have spoken about that before, and it's a common thing that is relevant in all of our lives. So for you at that time, when you said you finished basically your smicha process here, and it's like, okay, what comes next? And you had a clear opportunity to go to America. Baruch Hashem, your wife had the foresight and basically said, we're staying here. But when you have an opportunity like that in front of you, that's pretty like, it's right there for you to take it. And you felt like that's something you connected to, that you would do a great job at, that you feel like, hey, maybe this is what Hashem wants me to do. And yet on the other side, to stay here, you didn't necessarily know what you had in front of you. So how did you pass up on that opportunity in that way when you felt like maybe that's something that Hashem wants me to do? How'd you know to make that decision? I
didn't. But I know that a Yid needs to be in Eretz Yisrael. And I also knew that I would be happier here. Like I feel more connected in Eretz Yisrael. And if you're in a good mental space, you can also be a better provider of service for Am Yisrael. I think it was Rav Kook on many of his letters when he signed. So before he would sign his name, he would write Eved Lam Kadosh. Right? He says, I'm a servant to Holy Nation. That's how he would define himself. That's the job of the rabbinate. We're here to serve Am Yisrael. And when you have the right set of kelim and you're in the right mindset, so you can do a much better job, right? And I think David HaMelech says, Ani avdecha ben amasecha, pitachta l'moser. I'm your servant, the son of your servant, right? Pitachta l'moser, unshackle me. What does that mean? Meaning, give me the kelim that I can do the best to service Am Yisrael. So, like lahavdil, if you have someone who's a janitor, so you have to buy him a mop and a clean and a spritz and the whole thing, and then he can do a better job. An accountant, you need to buy a computer. A doctor, you have to give him, the room that he can operate in. So if you're in the right mindset and you have the right kelim to do it, you can do a much better job here.
I love that answer. And to the point of what Rav Kook said, like, we are all trying to do our best to serve the Jewish people. And the fact that you had the foresight to say, this is the place where I feel more connected to myself. I feel like this is obviously where I want to, live for the future. It's special that you had the foresight at that time. And my next thought is to touch on what you said before, which you get to that point, you pass up on the opportunity to go back to America. And now it's like, okay, I'm here. And now you got to start asking your question, what am I going to do for a career, to support my family, to live a life here? And that's where the idea of Semichas Chaver began. So take me and the listeners through that a little bit of, what do you see amongst the needs for the Jewish people specifically here in Israel? And then how did the idea of Semichas Chaver come to be? And for somebody that doesn't know what that is, explain from the beginning.
Okay, so it really, if to give all the credit, it all comes from my family upbringing. Like our Shabbos meals and our Yontiv meals, like when we got older, it's all, what can we do to help Am Yisrael? I have amazing brothers and amazing sisters, and they all help in different ways. And my parents obviously instilled this in us. And this is like our discussion. Like when we meet for Yontiv, it's like, what's the next big thing we're doing for Am Yisrael? Like what could we offer that we haven't offered yet? Like what? And that's like our mindset. And then when we show up to the meal, like we're already thinking like, okay, we're going to discuss like how we can improve in what area and what niche. And a lot of times, like I'll present something and they're like, oh no, it's no good, or it is good, or at this point or that. So that's where it really like everything starts. Like it's an upbringing of what could we do best. Now, what's fascinating, and I'll just taking a tangent for a second, is that when we were living in the first years, we were living in Shar Chesed in Rechavia. And we had the schus to get close to Rav Elyada Goldwicht. My brother, Rav Elyada Goldwicht, he was the associate rabbi at Hanasi Shul. And then we spent a lot of lunches with him. And he like instilled this a lot with us. He has like a famous story that he relays a lot of time, that when Rav Herzog came to Chicago, he came right after he was trying to save Jews who were stolen by the Catholics during the wars, like in the 1950s. And he came to Chicago and he gave like a whole Sichas Musar and a whole like Shiur and Lamdis. And then at the end, he told everyone that he just came from Europe and he was in the Vatican and he spoke to the Pope and he said, give me back the Jewish children that you guys took. And he wouldn't. The Pope like refused it. And Rabbi Beryl Wein describes how Rav Herzog literally on the stender started crying. He put his head down and he was crying. And he was crying for like a few minutes. And then he lifts his head up and he says, I can't save those Jews. He says, and then he looks at everyone in the crowd and he says, well, what are you going to do for the Jewish people? Right? And then he said, when everyone walked by him, he would shake their hand and he says, what are you doing for the Jewish people? And Rabbi Wein used to say, like, I can still hear him say, what are you doing for the Jewish people? So that also, so it's all from that upbringing of what are we doing, what we can help. So when I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? So I wanted I felt that a lot of people who make Aliyah, there's like a little bit of a dip in once they get here. And let me explain what that means. That before a person makes Aliyah, there's a lot of excitement of, I'm good, especially when they know they're going to be doing this for their whole life. So like they might only marry someone who's also is thinking about making Aliyah. And then if they marry someone who is thinking about marrying Aliyah, so then every purchase that they make up until that point, it's all with the mindset, how is this going to affect my Aliyah? So I'm buying a couch to my newlywed, apartment. Is it going to fit in the lift? Is it not going to fit in the lift? Right? Like those are like thoughts every second. They're thinking, how is this going to affect my Aliyah or not? And then they finally make it here. And there's the preparation where they have kids, they don't, and then they get here. And then we're here. And then they wake up in the morning, I'm here. Now what? Right? So naturally, Am Yisrael and humans in general, we always strive to grow. We always want to have like one to keep on moving. So I said, if we can grab this excitement and this passion, and now let's just, push it in a certain direction, that growth continues. And that's where Semichas Chaver were born. Semichas Chaver is a halacha program that's catered for Balabatim. Okay, and we have three main goals. Our goal is that people should enjoy learning. It should be fun. It should be awesome. It should be geshmak. Should have a good time. Number two is that whatever they learn, they should bring home to their wife, to their kids, to their family in a fun way. And then number three is that they should remember their learning. A lot of times people learn, and like you ask them, what did you learn a month ago or a year ago or last night? I saw you in the shul. I don't remember, right? So here, like when you make a kinyan on the halachos or on any learning that you do, it's a much more geschmack experience. So that was the goal. Now, where did the inspiration come from? So this was a conversation I had with my brother Rav Elyada Goldwicht in his car. I remember it was like late at night, and he told me, he was like, listen, he's like, the most successful Torah initiative in the history of Am Yisrael was the Daf Yomi movement by far. Nothing even comes close. So the inspiration for Semichas Chaver came from the Daf Yomi. Let me explain. Right, Daf Yomi, the advantage of it is that there's a beginning and an end. Right, we start brachos, we end nida, but even more so. Like I started Baba Kama and I just finished Baba Kama, and then Baba Metzia. Like there's siumin. There's like this. There's a clear path of what I need to do, and then there's points of entry. Now, let's say I learned Baba Basra when I was in Kerem Yavne. So now they're doing Baba Basra. I would love to chazer. So I join, and then okay, I'm back on. I'm in it. And then there's a sense of accomplishment. Holy cow, I just finished Baba Basra. Or oh my goodness, 7.5 years, I just finished Shas. Right? So there's a beginning and an end. There's points of entry, and there's a feeling of accomplishment. What's the chisaron of Daf Yomi? The chisaron of Daf Yomi is that it's every day, which it's not necessarily a chisaron. That's definitely an advantage, but it's harder to break into if you're not used to it. And also, the retention is close to zero for most people, if they're honest, right? There's not a lot. So I said, let's take the advantages of the daf without the chisaron of the daf. So we'll have a program where there's a beginning and an end. So it's 6 months at a time. And there's a sense of accomplishment. At the end of every 6 months, there's a test, and there's a CM, and you feel good about it. There's points of entry. Every 6 months, you can join. And then also, you don't have the downside. So the shiur is just once a week. It's not every single day. And also, the whole goal is that you actually remember it. There's a test at the end, so you feel like I made a kinyan. So that was like the structure to mimic it off of other successes, right? Like Steve Jobs, he didn't invent the computer and he didn't invent the phone. He put them together and he created the iPhone. So it's taking different ideas of things that are successful. And I think anyone who's trying to do something successful, you don't need to invent the wheel. You need to take the wheel and connect it to a car. And now you have yourself into an engine. Now you have a car. So it's taking pieces that exist already and putting them together. And that's the Yetzirah. So the way the program works is that, and I remember when we started, I put out a bunch of ads, and I got a few people to join. We started in Yerushalayim and in Beit Shemesh. And the way the shiur works is that it's once a week. We start with 5 minutes of like Tamei mitzvot, or the hashkafa, the reasons behind the halacha. So let's say we're learning basar b'chalav. Every week will be a different reason why Hashem doesn't want us to eat meat and milk. And the goal of that is to bring Hashem into the learning. A lot of times when we learn specifically halacha, it's like very dry, or it's very, like it's very detail oriented. So here it's like, what does Hashem even want us for this? And it makes the learning so much more gishmak and also more like understandable. Like when you see a gzeira of Chazal, you're like, oh, I get what they were trying to do because I understand the reason behind it. So that's the first, let's say 5 minutes, lets the guys land. Then we have about 7 minutes where the Maggid Shiur, which is the Rav who's teaching it, he throws out like very interesting, cutting edge, fascinating questions. And the goal is to get everyone, to give an answer. And what I tell the guys in the shiur and what the Rabbi do is say, listen, I'm going to ask you a question. I want to hear an answer from everyone in the room. Just be warned, whatever you answer, I promise you I'm going to say the opposite. You say mutter, I'm going to say asr. You say right, I'm going to say left. For the next 10 minutes, I just want to fight with you. That's the goal. And what this the 10 minutes or so, 7-10 minutes of this, what it does is it creates an appetite for the shiur. Like you're just completely confusing them. And then they're like, okay, so what's the answer? So then we begin the shiur itself. We start from the earliest sources in the Psukim, Mishnah, Gemara, all the way down to the modern day poskim. And then throughout the shiur, we answer the questions that we started. Sometimes we have videos in the shiur that bring the halachas alive. Like we were learning, when we learned Hilchos Shabbos. So we learned they're allowed to open a metal cap, a plastic cap, a bag of chips. So when you see how it's made in the factory, so you get a better understanding of how it's made, and then you can apply the halachos to the mitzias of what's there. So that's the shiur in a nutshell. And then at the end of every shiur, we email the participants 3 things. We email them a summary of the shiur. So if, like me, you have ADD and you spaced out, so you have like a review where you're able to like read it. Then we email the questions that we started the shiur off with. We send that to the participants with the answers. So I was now someone in the shiur. I had the questions, and I saw the transmission of the Mesorah from Har Sinai. Like we went, Psukim, Mishnah, Gemara, Rishonim, Shulchan Aruch, all the way to the modern day poskim to me. I learned it from my Rav. Now I'm taking everything that I learned, and on Shabbos, I'm bringing that to my Shabbos table. And I'm going to ask my wife to see if she remembers something from seminary. I'm going to ask my guests, my kids, right? So I'm now being part of this chain of Am Yisrael from Har Sinai all the way down to here. And that is such an empowering thing for someone who's learning. It's not just I'm a mikabel. I'm not just receiving, but I'm also giving it over. I think naturally people, we don't want to just take, right? By definition, this is what we discussed the whole time, right? You want to give over, and who else do we want to give over to if not for our children? So we send out the questions with the answers that you can bring to your Shabbos table and really, have a discussion that has of content around the table. And then on top of that, we also send a comic. We have an amazing comic. His name is Dov Ber Cohen. He's amazing. And what he does is he'll take one of the question and answers and he makes it into a comic strip. And like that, you can. And what the comic is that it presents a situation, and then you can discuss it. And the last box is the answer to that halachic debate. So the participants get all this every week. And then at the end of 6 months, when we learn like a nice amount, there's a test. And those who pass the test, they get this certificate, which is called Semichas Chaver, the Semichas Chaver certificate, which is a certificate of accomplishment, signed by 3 Gdol Yisrael currently. It's signed by Rav Neventhal from the Old City, by Rav Schachter, Yeshiva of YU, and Rav Amar, who's the Rishon LeZion Sephardi chief rabbi. So it's like one Rav from every genre of Klal Yisrael. And the goal of the certificate is twofold. One, to incentivize the guys to learn and to take the test. And 2, it's, again, since we want to bring everything back home, so a child that grows up in a home where his father's proud of his accomplishments in Torah learning, it has an amazing effect on him, right? Like you're a sports guy, right? And I grew up in Washington Heights, so I remember when, whenever it was the Yankees and Red Sox, it was crazy, right? It was nuts. And in New York, right? Everyone knows that if your dad's a Yankee fan, your son isn't going to be a Red Sox fan. Why? Because when you go to the game and you love it and it's called out Smosai Tamarna, so it seeps into the next kids, the generation. So same thing over here. If you're a Torah fan and you're loving it and there's a siyum and there's a certificate and you're hanging it up and you're showing this is what I'm proud of, it automatically seeps into the next generation. So that's the bigadol what smichas. Now it wasn't always this clear, right? When I started off, but that's more or less what it is now. And thank God we're in over 300 locations now in 5 different languages. And it's amazing. It's really incredible.
I was going to say, you just gave a perfect pitch for anybody, including myself, and I told you this before, I've been contemplating doing this program for a while, and I feel like this is after this podcast, I got to officially jump on board. So if somebody's listening to this that's like, hey, maybe I want to take my learning practical, and as you're saying, what's so cool about the program, as opposed to many other things within the Jewish world, is that sometimes you learn, and then you go home and it doesn't really stay in your pocket, but to take something that, for example, in halacha in Judaism, which is, for those that don't know, the guide to our daily living in Judaism, to understand the source where it stems from, and then to take it in the most practical way of how can you apply this to your life and how does it affect you on a day-to-day basis? And then on the more so, how could you bring that into your family is a really, really cool and novel idea. And no wonder when you thought about that at that time period, and as you just kind of flash forward, you're in 300 locations across the world, which is mind-blowing. But just take me and the listeners back for a second of, as we were saying before, you decide to stay in Israel. You had to come up with what you're going to do. You're like, all right, got this awesome idea. Here we go. And now it's like, fine, you got that deal, Semichas Chaver. Where do you even start? As you said before, the first place you did was a location in Yerushalayim. And then I know you came to do in Beit Shemesh. But after that, how do you get people on board? A lot of rabbis are busy. They have their schedules. Who wants to teach us? Like, what was that like for you?
Right. So fascinating. It's like this. When I started, I spoke to the vice president of the OU at the time. He happened to be in Israel. I was like, what do you think of this idea? He's like, I love it. He's like, go speak to Rabbi Berman. Rabbi Berman is the director of YU, of the OU in Israel. I spoke to him. He's like, oh, I love it. So he gave me an ad in the Torah Tidbits for free and a place in the OU center to give the shiur. And that's how we started. And then it was like slowly, micro, like grassroots, speaking to people. And that's how we got the word out. And that's how it spread and how it got to so many different locations. But then so the first, let's go back. The first 6 months, right, which was the first Zman, I didn't even know how long it was going to be. First, I told people that it was going to be only 3 months. I told them it's going to be from Elul to Hanukkah. And the reason why I told them that, because I didn't think people would commit for 6 months. And I also didn't know how long it would be. So it's like, kind of like you have to go with the flow type of thing. And then we were in the sugya, like we were learning Basa B'chal. That's what we started off with. And people were like into it. I was like, okay, we have to do a little bit more. Like we can't just end now. Let's continue. So everyone's like, great, let's continue. And then we had the siyum towards Pesach time. And then once we had the siyum and the next month started, then our numbers doubled. right? So we started off with like 20 in Yerushalayim and about 12 in Ramat Beit Shemesh. And then by the second Zman, after the Siyum, we had about 50 in Yerushalayim and like 20 plus 25 in Ramat Beit Shemesh. So I was like, oh, we're onto something, okay? Now so once I was onto something, I was like, let's try to scale this, right? Now I only woke up to scale it like at the end of Elul towards Sukkot, and I was like, maybe I can get someone to teach it, in Chutzar. So I just figured let's start calling. Now, before I went into the rabbinate, I actually thought I was going to go into business, right? And I went when I was in YU, so I was in SciSims, which is like a business school, and I was also like thinking different ideas. I'd always had like these different type of ideas. So one of the ideas that I had to start a business, which I actually tried starting and failed, when I was in like the first 2 years here in Israel, like I was learning in Kolob, I was like figuring out at the time so I had this idea. My brother, it was like right when like QR codes were coming out, right? Everything was like a QR code, and then eventually it became you don't even need a QR code. It's just like there's like the camera recognizes what it's taking a picture of. So I had an idea to have like Facebook for the deceased. Right, a lot of times people have like they want to give over stories of their parents, like. Imagine you go to a cemetery and you want to see who are the people that are here. So imagine each one had a QR code, or each caver had a QR code, and then you can scan it and you can have like that person come to life. You see a picture of him, who he was, what he did, like you can learn from them. So I thought like this can be, first of all, an amazing, meaningful thing for the family. I think whenever a person tries to create any business, I think he should not only think about how am I going to make money, but also how is this going to service Am Yisrael and the world. So I figured like this is an amazing thing for everyone's end, meaning for the family and also for the visitors who come. And I thought, where could be the best place to, like, who would gain from this the most? So I thought like soldiers, fallen soldiers, and people from the fire department or police department. So I was like, where's the money at? Not in Israel. So I said, let's try to do this in America. So I literally would look online for like senators' numbers and congressmen and like that. And I somehow got like the phone number of the head of the FDNY, like the head of the fire department in New York. And I just called him up. I was like, listen, I have this idea. We're going to put a thing. And I was like, I'll do it for free. Like, we'll get the thing. We'll make a Facebook page. Like, and it could be such a nice thing for all your fallen firefighters, especially the ones, in 9/11. If someone goes to visit the cemetery, like they can see who the person was. And then like, if you're moved by him, you can even send a message to the family. Hey, I was just in, cemetery. I saw your husband, your father, whatever. Thank you so much for the service he gave. I really appreciate it. Can you imagine what that would do to the family? So I thought it was a brilliant idea. I still think it's a good idea, but it didn't work. But I wasn't embarrassed to like call people, and how many times I got like no, we're not interested, or like. So I was like, just you have to, you try until you succeed. So I figured the same thing. So I started calling Rabbanim in America that I knew, and some of them hung up the phone on me, and then some of them were like, oh, let me hear. So the first Rav that I called was Rabbi Leibowitz. And I pitched them. I was like, listen, I have this great idea. It's been working. I was like, do you give halacha shiur? He was like, yeah. I was like, how many people come? So he tells me, he's like, I don't know, like 12 berach. I said, and he tells me that it's for 45 minutes. I was like, listen, I have a shiur. We have 50 people. I was like, you want to get 50 people? I was like, it's got to be an hour and 15 to an hour and a half. You got to give a test at the end. He's like, what are you talking about? Then I walked him through the whole thing, what I basically told you now. He's like, yeah, let's try. He's like, who cares, right? The 12 guys are going to come anyways. Let's see more. And it's an amazing thing. So he went on board, and Baruch Hashem, his shiur was incredible. It still is. He's still giving it, and I have tremendous akaras tov to him. Every time I meet him, I tell him, thank you so much for helping it, get off the ground. Because every other Rav that I would call afterwards, at least the English-speaking ones, I would say, by the way, do you want to join Semichas Chaver? Rabbi Avi Proctor is doing it. So they're like, oh, now let me hear. Like that, they started to listen. So some said yes, some say no, and then once it worked, so then, thank God, people, that's how it spread.
And then slowly but surely, I assume, this rabbi tells this rabbi, and this rabbi tells this rabbi, and then
even more, the participants told their friends. And we still have a rule that we don't record, we don't put anything online, right? So you won't find a single Semichas Chaver recording online. And the main reason is that our goal isn't just to teach halacha. If our goal was just to teach halacha, I would create the most amazing website. I would get 3 of the best rabbanim in the world to record shiurim, and you can sit at home with your shorts and t-shirt and download shiurim and take tests and whatever. It's not our goal. Our goal is to get people on fire in their Torah learning. Our goal is to create chaburas of people that are excited and passionate. They'll bring the learning home. They'll show it to their wives, to their kids. And that only happens when you come together, right? It's like, I'll tell you an interesting story. If we mentioned Rabbi Wine. So during COVID, so I was sitting with him once and like things were on Zoom. Everything was on Zoom, right? So I said like, Rav, do you see a world where like we give shiurim on Zoom? I was like, for me, it's pretty convenient. Like I used to travel to Beit Shemesh, you get stuck in traffic. It's 45 minutes, an hour. I was like, no, I sit at home. I don't go anywhere. I speak into the computer. I'm done. I start at 8:30. I'm done at 10. Like there's no travel. It's amazing. It's like Zoom is the worst thing in the world. And right, this is part of the reason why we don't put it online. I was like, well, like why is it so bad? So he said, I wanted to share with you a story. This is such an amazing story. He says, and it sums up Semichas Chaver, I think, also. He says, I want to share you a story when I was a kid. He said, when he was a kid, he grew up in Chicago, and his father was a Rav. And his father tried to save as many Rabbanim from Europe as possible. And the way he would do that is he would give them visas, right? Working visas, to the point that he once had 12 assistant rabbis. And he said the feds came to the shul and to his father, and they're like, what do you need 12 assistant rabbis for? So his father's like, what do you mean? There's Shachar, there's Mincha, and there's Marav. He's like, on Shabbos, there's also Musaf. And then he started like dragging them a cup. They're like, you need 12 different assistant rabbis. But that's what he brought in the name. So one of the Rabbanim that he was able to save, that he was able to get a visa, was Rav David Lifshitz. Rav David Lifshitz later on became our Yeshiva in YU. He lived in our building when we were growing up. He was known like, he was like our malach. Like he was 2 floors underneath us. And whenever we would see him, it was like, you saw like the Shechina walking in the street. And he's told me, Rav Bar Wine, he says, when I was in 1st or 2nd grade, so my father asked Rav David Lifshitz to teach me Chumash. So he says, I was learning with Rav David Lifshitz. And he says, he's a big Rav. He was the Rav of Sulvak, I think, of big city. He's like, he's teaching me Chumash Rashi. He says, and just Chumash. He says, and he asked me a question on the pasuk. He says, later I learned it was Rashi's question. He says, and I suggested an answer. He says, and later I also learned that what answer did it happen to be? It happened to also be Rashi's answer, right? So he says, this is like the chavrusa that he's having with him. He says, so I'm reading the Chumash. Rav David Lifshitz asked me a question, and I answered the question, and I got the right answer. He says, Rav David Lifshitz got so excited. He said, he jumped up in the stair, he says, you got the answer. That's what Rashi says. That's what Rashi HaKadosh answers. Do you have? He took out a sugar cube. I guess that was like before Pachkis. He says, he took out a sugar cube, and he says, and he stuck it in my mouth. He said, geschmack. He says, right, you got the answer right. And Rav Bar Wine says, he says, I can still taste the sweetness of that sugar cube in my mouth today. He says, and that you can't do on Zoom. That you need to have the interpersonal relationship of the geschmack and the chiyas. You can only do that face to face, right? And that's why he was against, the Zoom learning, and that's why we don't put things online, because our goal isn't just to teach Allah. Our goal is to create people who are on fire with Torah learning.
I was going to say, when I was preparing for this, and for those that aren't familiar enough with your Semichas Chaver work, you've done the Semichas Chaver podcast, Semichas Chaver, and you've done a lot of things. And I was looking for it. I was like, listen, if it doesn't work out with my schedule, I might as well go online and try to find the shiur. And I kept looking. I'm like, I can't find it anywhere. So you just answered my question for probably a lot of people too that are thinking about it. So the next thing I was just going to ask you about this is, now that you built it up to 300 locations across the world in 5 different languages, do you look at the program now and still say, there's things that need to be adjusted? I'm still trying to expand this. I want to double, triple it in size. Like, how do you not get complacent with where you're at in this?
Oh, absolutely. We need a lot of improvement. For starters, we need to build a website, like a good one that can actually show people where to go and in each location. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and you're always perfecting the material and perfecting the product and making sure that the Rabbanim understand the goals of it and how to give it over well and how to really give the learner the best experience, right? I don't want a Rav to just a lot of times I have Rabbanim call me up, be like, listen, can't do Semichas Chaver, but do you mind sending me the material you have on Hilchos Shabbos? I would love to just give a Shabbos shiur, on Hilchos Shabbos in my shiur, my shul. And I always say no, because our goal, and this is the hadracha I got from the Rabbanim initially, our goal isn't just to be a curriculum provider for Rabbanim. Our goal is to create chaburas of people who are on fire, and that happens in the structure.
It's awesome that you have that passion and that you have that understanding of it's about the experience too. You want to give somebody the geschmack on the learning. You want to make it practical. You want to connect them to it. And as you're saying, making a chabura, and a lot of things in Judaism are about a chabura. And to that point of, this kind of channels me into the next thing I want to talk about with you, which is you do Semichas Chaver, obviously. And as we were kind of building up your story, you chose to stay in Israel. You figured out exactly what it is that you want to do. You take all your time, and For those that know, Rav Goldwicht is very busy with preparing Semichas Chaver Baruch Hashem. And you also have a lot of other things that are going on. And when you decide to take on Semichas Chaver, that was probably everything for you in your life in Israel. And then another opportunity came on your way, which for those that know, Baruch Hashem KLR, the amazing shul in Ranana, who I've had the pleasure to see it up hand and close, even 2.5 years ago, which I was blown away then, and I'm even blown away now to see what's going on. But it's something that for people that are making Aliyah, it's something that we need, honestly, to have a community, to have a rabbi and stuff like that. So take me and the listeners through a little bit of that process of kind of what's going on there in Ranana. How did you end up there? And give us the lowdown a little bit.
So this was fascinating. I guess I'll call Siyata Dishmaya. I never wanted to be a shul rabbi, like I mentioned before. And there's an amazing yid named Colin Goldstein who decided that he wants to open a shul. His love and passion for Am Yisrael and Torah is incredible. And he decided he wants to open a shul in Ranana. So he, through a friend, is introduced to me, and he meets me, and he's like, "Listen, come move to Ranana. Come help us build a shul." And I was like, "Listen, I'm not a shul rabbi, and I'm not a good shul rabbi either, and I'm not gonna be a good shul. Like, you don't want me. Like, I was like, the meeting was, come join. And I was like, no, you don't want me. Like, you don't understand. Like, it's not good. Now, why did I even consider talking to him? Also, thanks to my wife. It's all the women in Am Yisrael. So we were living in Yerushalayim. The disadvantage of where we were in Yerushalayim is that we didn't feel there was like a community there. Like where I was davening on Shabbos, didn't even have a women's section. So if like I wanted to take my daughter to shul, she would have nowhere to go. So, and we were looking for, in Chutz La'aretz, people live in communities. So she's like, why don't we go? And maybe we can build a community, right? So that was like the impetus to even try it. So for the first year, we were going just for Shabbos. We were living in Yerushalayim. We would drive for Shabbos. We would get there Friday afternoon. My wife would cook all the food in Yerushalayim. We would get there. We would unpack, have Shabbos, and then Motzei Shabbos, we would repack everything and drive back to Yerushalayim. And we did that because of our kids. Like we didn't want to take them out of school on a maybe, right? So we did that for a whole year, and it was crazy, especially in the summer. Like we would get back to Yerushalayim at like 12 o'clock at night. Like our kids were jet lag every single week. Imagine like that's what it was. Like you'd fall asleep in the car and then wake them up and you schlep them up 2 stories, to get them into bed. And it was, but in that year, I saw and I met the most amazing and incredible people ever. And that are the people who go to KLR and the people who lived in Ranana and are looking to grow and get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And all they want is Kirvas Elokim, which is what every Jew wants deep down inside. It's what really gives us a simcha. And it was a shul where from day one, I said, guys, the doors here are always open, right? Everyone is welcome to come. I don't care if you're the most religious person in Ranana or you're not religious at all. Everyone's welcome to come, but it's on one condition. I said, if you're coming here, it's on condition that you want to grow. It's like if you're not interested in growing, if you're looking for a kiddush and for whatever, there's a lot of other shuls, a lot of other places, go do that in a different place. But if you're coming into these doors, it's on condition that you want to grow. And the place filled up in seconds. And people are like, yalla, like, show me, what do I need to do? And it's amazing. Like I noticed in the beginning, people weren't wearing tzitzis. Like there were a few people who weren't wearing, so I got up and I gave a shiur about like the importance of tzitzis. The next day, a guy comes up and it was shachar. This was at night. Shachar, he comes. He's like, Rav, look, I have tzitzis. I was like, he's like that. He said, I made Aliyah 5 years ago. He said, it's Ranana. If you've ever been to Ranana in the summer, it's like preview of Gehenna. Okay, it's like, it's really hot and humid. And he's like, I took my tzitzis off because a lot of people are taking their tzitzis off. He's like, and no one ever told me to put them back on. He's like, you're the first person to tell me to put it back on. So I put them back on. And now he wears them all the time. And it's like, it's an amazing thing. It just shows how people really want to grow. And I give a shiur every Shabbos after the Kiddush, and Baruch Hashem, it's very well attended. We always start with halacha, a few minutes of halacha, how to do this. And people are always interested. 1 second, but what about this? What about that? And it's an amazing growth-oriented community. And like you mentioned before, when people come to Eretz Yisrael, I think more than making Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, which is of course what you do, it's a lot easier to make Aliyah to a community, right? When you already have a place and a shul, and the definition of a community is that you have, places to go. Like in our shul, whenever there's someone who makes Aliyah and he comes to the shul, first of all, we welcome him, and the whole shul sings. They get like flowers, we send them, and it's like just a welcoming package to help. And everyone in the shul made Aliyah. So everyone is going through the same issues of the making Aliyah, trials and tribulations. And it's really, for me, it's been like the most inspiring place in my Yiddishkeit, in like my journey of Yiddishkeit, to see people, like I'm a Rav. So my job is to learn and to give a shiur and to inspire people, right? Other Yidden, like they're working and they're busy, but to see like what they really want, and what they really want is to grow and get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's the most inspiring thing for me.
I could really attest to that because obviously, as I mentioned before, I came in that year when you were going back and forth, as you were saying, from Yerushalayim,
Right.
and I saw your kids and Baruch Hashem, they looked happy at the time, and seeing you in that role as a leader and inspiring people, you were obviously very happy and passionate about what you're doing, and the other part of there's a commonality in America of communities. You have a rabbi and you have a shul and everything, the kehillah, they come together, and in your shul KLR, as you're saying, after Shabbos, it's not, typical shuls in Israel. A guy davens and you go home and you go back with your family, but you have a kiddush and it's not lacking. It's not like two
nice
tables in
kiddush.
Baruch Hashem. They take care of everybody there, and then all of a sudden, like when I was there at the kiddush, everybody's like, "Oh, we're going back into the shul to hear Rav Goldwicht's shiur," and I was like, "What's going on?" There must have been 100+ people in that room, men and women on Shabbos, and they were just hungry. And speaking to people and seeing it, I could definitely attest to what you're saying. And my next thought on that is, being in this position and then finally deciding, okay, now I've done this for a year. I tried it out for a year. I really enjoy it. You have to make the next step, which was, do you move your family? Do you not? What was that like for you?
So that was a hard decision for me personally, because I'm on my father's side, we're 8 generations Yerushalmi. So to me, like to leave Yerushalayim is like, it's almost like leaving Eretz Yisrael. It's like where would Havdel, right? But it was hard, right? And my family's in Yerushalayim, and we were very comfortable in Yerushalayim. If it was up to me, I would still go back and forth. But my wife, she's like, "You're nuts! Like we can't do this," and she's right. So we had to make a decision. We had to. It's either like, are we going or are we not going? And I remember I went out with my wife so we first spoke to 3 different like rabbanim and my parents, obviously, and like weighing in the ins and out. At the end of the day, you have to make your decision, right? So I remember I went out to eat with my wife. I was like, okay, we have to make a decision. So we went out and we took out a piece of paper and we started writing like all the pros and cons of both things. And like in the middle, like my wife starts to cry, like because like it's a hard decision. And I remember there was this other like Israeli couple like on the side, like they thought like we were fighting about something. So like they walk over and like give her a napkin and they're like, like why did you make her cry? I was like, she's crying for me. She's not crying because of me. But it was a hard decision. And then we decided, yalla, we're gonna make the leap, and we did, and it was amazing. We moved in September, and then a month later was October 7th. So for our kids, it wasn't simple, right? Like you move a city, and then there's no school, and then there's war, and then there's bomb shelters, and then like it was an adjustment. But in those months, and in the years since the war, my love and appreciation for the people in Ra'anana grew 10x. And what you see on the outside is not what you see, what's really going on in the inside. It's like the first year that I was there was a guy who was like, like these like runners that are like obsessive runners. Like they wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they're like running like 10Ks and then 20Ks and 30Ks. There was a guy like that. It was like a friendly guy in the shul. And I always make fun of him because I'm self-conscious that I don't do that and I'm not in shape. And he can like, I walk to the end of the block and I'm huffing and puffing and he's doing like up and down. So naturally, what do humans do? We try to like make fun of him, and he's like a good guy, fine. So like I would always like kibitz him. I was like, where are you running to? Who are you running from? Like I'd always I like make fun of it. And then the war breaks out and he's like on the front lines running in. He's like in an elite unit going in and out and back and forth. And it hit me. I was like, he's not running for himself. And when he wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning, every step he's taking, it's for Am Yisrael. He wakes up and he says, I need to stay in shape because if I do get called up, I need to be in the best shape possible to help Am Yisrael. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, holy cow. This guy literally wakes up at 5 in the morning for Am Yisrael every single day. I was like, I don't do that. I don't wake up at 5 for Am Yisrael. I wake up, I roll to Shachrit, sometimes early, sometimes late, right? It's like, it's a crazy thing. That's a crazy thing. And he's one out of 100, and everyone does their own way and their own unique thing, and the sacrifice that people give, and it opens your eyes to seeing the beauty of, the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It says, Mi Kamchi Yisrael. I get it. It's really amazing.
I can imagine. And as you're saying, to your point, and this is what I want to touch on, of once you got into the community and you're in it and you're speaking with the people, and for those that know, a rabbinical position is, it's not, you're learning, obviously, you're giving shiur, but you're also sitting with people, you're seeing what's going on in their life, and there's a lot more that people don't necessarily see. And you might get up to speak in Shul on Shabbos, and you might see that person that, you know, they might be smiling on their face, but there might be some other things that they're going through, and you really get to see people on a level that from the outside most people don't see. And to that point is Renana, a community that people might look on the outside and be like, wow, you know, might put their stereotypes, whatever it may be. Like, what have you learned about people that make Aliyah, specifically in that community, but also like you're very in touch with people in Israel, of how has your like view of the Jewish people kind of been shifted over the past few years from the position that you're in now?
So the advantage of a Rav is, and the disadvantage, is that you get to see people in their greatest moments and in their hardest moments, and you get to see what they're going through. And as I mentioned before, I'm not a good Rav. And I tell this to my shul also, and I apologize to them. I'm like, I'm really probably one of the worst pulpit rabbis that exist, because I don't have the time to, like, I would love to sit with everyone and have a cup of coffee and, like, you know them more and talk to them more. I don't, if I would do that, there wouldn't be Semichas Chaver. And I feel like, you know, having 300 locations with thousands of people learning and giving it over to their kids, and it's like a whole, you know, I wouldn't have that. So you have to say no to something. Whenever you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So I'm not a good rabbi. I'm not a good community rabbi. But there are times, obviously, where you need to, where you have to, not you need to, you want to, right? It's like, I want to do more than I can, but there's sometimes where, like, you really, really need to and want to. And that you see up close. You see the people's pain and suffering, and you see them in shul and they're smiling, but deep down inside, you know, they're going through a very difficult time, and sometimes everyone else sees it also, right? And it's hard. It's hard to see, you know, the pain and suffering of Am Yisrael. There's in our shul, there are 2 soldiers that fell since the beginning of the war. One is Yeroni Chidis, Hashem Yikom Damo, and one is Natan Rosenfeld, Hashem Yikom Damo. And when Natan fell, which was almost a year ago, Gimel Tammuz, so the family calls me up right away. Like, once the 3 soldiers knocked on their door, the father called me and says, you have to come. So it's like you walk into the house when 10 minutes after they just heard the worst news possible. And it's like, there's nothing that could describe that. And then the craziest thing happened. It takes, like, you sit with the 3 soldiers that are there, you have to make sure that the Levaya preparations, everything's done. And then once everything's in order, then they give the green light of Hutag Lepirsum, where you can
Tell people.
tell people about it. And then it gets sent out in the news, and then everyone knows. The whole city knows. Right? So then people start coming in. Like, you know, the moment it's Hutag Lepirsum, the house gets flooded with people coming just to give a hug and cry. And one of the people that came was the father of the first fallen soldier. So when they met in that moment, it was one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. They run to each other, they hug, and they cry for a minute. And then after a minute, the father, who just lost his son, he picks his head up off the other father, and he says, I never wanted to be part of this club. He says, but I am part of this club now. And he says, but for the first time, I can actually say, I'm so sorry for what you went through. And I can feel what you went through now for the first time. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. And they continued to hug. And I was like, look at the mindset of this father. His name is Avi Rosenfeld. And his whole, he goes around now, like, giving chizuk to Am Yisrael and talking about his emunah and his struggle with emunah and how hard it is and how difficult it is. And it's like, you don't, it's an amazing thing. They interviewed, I saw an interview, someone sent me a clip of, I think his name is Michael Eisenberg. He started Aleph, like one of these VCs, and some organization, some like news agency, like, asked him, like, don't you want to live in Chutzar? It's like, isn't it like so much easier and so much comfortable? And like, you have Amazon Prime, and like, you can get things the next day. And one of his, like, the core of his answer that spoke to me is like, I'm not looking for a comfortable life. I'm looking for a meaningful life. I said, I can retire and go on the beach and sit there for the rest of my life. What have I done? Because I'm looking for a life of meaning, not a life of comfort. He says, in Eretz Yisrael, you have a life of meaning. You can have a life of meaning in Chutz La'aretz also, but here it's you live with it every second.
It's it's wild. It's a very special story, and the fact that you're part of that journey with everybody. It's like the good, the bad, and you see everything. And like, I can't imagine what that does for you and just seeing the Jewish people in the light that you do, it's to be in your shoes is a very special, it's a very special thing, and I'm curious of another thing, as you were saying, of like, you mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, related to Semichas Chaver. You happen to have relationships with a lot of Rabbanim in America, a lot of prestigious Rabbanim, and now that you're a rabbi of your own kehila in Israel, that's growing so much. Shout out to all the amazing KLR people. And I just have to side note, as you said, you're too busy to talk to people in KLR, and you wish you could sit with everybody in the community. Start your own podcast. That's the way you're going to get the Rav Goldwicht to move you. That's my tip. But my thought is that you're connected with all these Rabbanim outside of Israel. They're all doing amazing things outside of here, and yet, as you alluded to in the beginning of the story, when you had your own experience or opportunity on the table to go to America, you looked at yourself, you said, this is where the Jewish people need to be, and this is where I need to be. And you, Baruch Hashem, your people could see your story, you figured out your path and what you could do for the Jewish people. When you're in contact with a lot of these Rabbanim that are doing things outside of Israel, do you ever try to encourage them to potentially come here, start something here on their own?
No, because I don't think it's my place to... And each person has his own shlichus, and at the end of the day, it's your life, and you have to know where you can give the most to. But when Rabbanim ask me, like when someone says, like, "What do you think?" Of course I encourage coming here. And every Rav, not every, most Rabbanim have an eye on Eretz Yisrael, and I think all Jews have an eye on Eretz Yisrael. It's like now everyone's leaving New York to Florida. That's like the last stop, and then coming here, right? Doesn't seem like there's a big future in Chutz La'aretz. So it's going to be here, and we have the greatest minds and the greatest people and the most incredible nation. And whatever you succeeded in Chutz La'aretz, the success can be here multiplied as well.
It's very true, and obviously everybody has their path and their derech. And the fact that you answer that question in a way of like, you didn't look at me and say, "Hey, everybody's got to come and they got to do their thing." It's you figure out what's best for you, what's best for the Jewish people, and there are a lot of Rabbanim in America that do wish that they're here, and obviously they're taking the steps to do it. I kind of want to end off because we're getting towards the end of our time together, which has been awesome hanging out with you again. Through your entire story, if people could pick up a consistent thing in your story, is throughout your entire path, you've always looked at yourself in the mirror and you said, "What does Hashem want from me, and what can I do for the Jewish people?" And Baruch Hashem, you've had the opportunities presented on the table to lead you in the path that you're in now. And what's so cool about your story is when you're at that pivotal crossroads in your life of, do I go back to America? Do I start a rabbinical position there? Or do I end up pursuing Eretz Yisrael? Hashem gave you that opportunity, and in my opinion, even better, as I'm sure you'll probably agree with what you have now. And it's wild to see how Hashem works in his ways and guides people in the direction that they want to go to serve the Jewish people. So I'm going to end off with one question to you. For whoever's listening to this podcast, wherever they're at in life, if you had one message that was like, keep this message with you in your pocket and take it with you every day, what would that be?
It would be try to service Am Yisrael to the best of your ability. And when you do that, like with your real, with a real passion, you'll have tremendous siyata d'shmaya. You're taking care of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kids. You're saying, "Hashem, I'm here." Which father, the teachers at the end of the school year, you give them a present, you write them a letter, thank you, Akar. So it's like the basic aleph beis, like for taking care of your kids, right? So when your mission in life is to take care of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's children and as many of them as possible, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's like, "Wow, thank you." Right, and what else would give him more nachas than that? So the idea is, and everyone has their own unique way. Like even in our community, it's not just the army and giving shiurim. It's chesed organizations. It's picking up the phone. It's like it's on so many different levels. That's what I think is the most important thing. And I'll end with an incredible story. Okay, I was giving a shiur in our shul after the kiddush. It was packed, and I quoted a video that I saw on YouTube. Okay, it was a YouTuber who was going around and he was asking people like on the street, "Would you trade places with Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett is worth, I don't know, $100 and something billion. Would you trade places with him?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I would trade. Like, who wouldn't? Like, I want $1 billion." So then they said, "Oh, by the way, he's like 95 years old. Would you still trade places with him?" And I was like, "Nah, what do you mean? For sure not." So the YouTuber would tell, "Look, you have a higher net worth than Warren Buffett because you wouldn't want to trade places with him." So like the idea of the shiur was like, realize how precious your time is. That was like the idea of the shiur. After the shiur, a woman comes up to me and she's like, "I would trade places with Warren Buffett." I was like, you missed the point of the shiur. Like, she's like, and I'll tell you why I would trade places with Warren Buffett. He says, could you imagine what I can do for Am Yisrael with $200 billion or whatever billion dollars he has? Could you imagine what I can do for the Jewish nation with that? So I'd be willing to turn 95 to be able to service Am Yisrael like that. And I was like, whoa, you got it more than me. Like, you chap much more than I did what Am Yisrael is all about. Like, and I said, I was like, you're no different than any soldier who's willing to give up his life for Am Yisrael. I was like, that's basically what you're telling me. He says, I'm willing to give up my life for the Jewish nation. So, Baruch Hashem, it's a huge mitzvah to die al Kiddush Hashem, but also to live al Kiddush Hashem. So the bracha I give everyone is that you should find where you're needed the most. And it doesn't have to always be these big, grandiose, big things. It starts with being a father. It starts with being a mother for your kids. It starts with opening the door to the person in front of you. It starts with your coworkers. And then think, where else you can advance and take care of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's children. And B'ezrat Hashem, if you do that, we have Siyata D'Shmaya there, and it'll spill in to everything else that you're doing.
That was an amazing, amazing story, and just very practical advice. And really for anybody on any level, any age, your young 20s, your late 70s, whatever that may be, it doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something small. Take it, figure out what you can do for the Jewish people. And that story of the lady of realizing what you can do with what Hashem gives you is really, really special. And God willing, people internalize that. And after this hour, honestly, I'm looking back, I'm like, wow, that was very fast. And we're at, I'm not going to say publicly what time of night it is right now, but Baruch Hashem, it's been an absolute pleasure sitting here with you and to just have this conversation and to get to understand your story a little more. Semichas Chaver, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you again for joining me, and looking forward to part 2 in the future.
Avi Tzaddik.